This is Pentimento by Kyme. The body stood erect and cruciform, naked and without modesty. Male, though the anatomical incisions made this difficult to define for certain, as did the general disfigurements to the victim overall. It appeared almost ritualistic, a statement of some kind. Observation was Maybeth's art. She had an eye for it, or so Hakasto had joked. Gifted, some said. To her, the old artisan had been like a father. He taught her everything he knew, until eventually she surpassed him. Oka Hakasto's craft became Maybeth's craft, she his only student. Then their work had been venerated around the world as nobles and oligarchs clamored for a sitting with the great Hakasto and his protege. Coin, renown, they had been short of neither. And now they say scent is the most powerful sense memory. Sitting in that empty church, the air thick with the reek of copper, Maybeth remembered her master. His legacy had ended with a knife in his neck and his arterial blood making a terrible mess of his otherwise fine robes. Coin, renown, but also jealousy and greed. She had wept and not changed her mourning robes for 6 days, her eyes thick with kohl, her lips inked black. His death, for all its callous senselessness, was mundane. Not like this. This was art. Grotesque, unconscionable, but art nonetheless. And she knew art. Hakasto had not taught her that. That was innate. She bled art. And there was much blood, lustrous and red. Now, only the dead would sit for her, and they had little choice or awareness of the matter. As Maybeth sketched, she took in the arms that had been strung by the victim's own sinews, hanging limply as if some godlike and invisible puppeteer held on to them from above. No, not a puppet, she realized. She had misread the artist's intentions. She sketched splayed feet, their broken toes and bones distended, and the clawed fingers reaching like strange branches. And finally, the position of the body, utterly straight, rigid as any trunk. Tree, she murmured aloud, pausing to regard it. What? Asked Levio. The proctor sounded gruff, his unshaven face further testimony of either a lack of self-respect or the lateness of the hour. Or both. He was badly dressed in a long coat and peacekeeper fatigues, one of several weary lawmen at large in the church. He worried at the Aquila rosary wrapped around his wrist, half eyeing the shadows of the dingy church with only stab lights to lift the darkness. He hid his irritation poorly. A tree, Maybeth repeated, her charcoal stylus poised. He has been arranged in the manner and aspect of a tree. There aren't any trees in the city. I didn't say it was based on anything in Durgov. Levio took another look. I only see some poor bastard tortured to death. He turned, frowned. You said arranged? Maybeth nodded. What do you think it means? Growth? Rebirth? Knowledge, maybe, she said. A tree has broad symbolic meaning. I don't see meaning. I see madness. City's infected with it. It had got worse. Ever since the sky had changed and the astropaths had died. No word out, no word in. Entire world had been affected. Something had happened, but no one knew what it was. only that it had. Powerlessness bred fear, fear bred violence. And so it went. "Why am I here, Proctor Livio?" "Arbitrator wants a record." He stalled to pick at something in his teeth. "He doesn't want to come down here to see for herself." Maybeth gestured to the perturbed-looking hunchback busying round a picture unit. "Then what's he here for? Would a pictograph not capture a more accurate impression of the scene? Not to mention be much faster. I'm not complaining," she hastened to add. "I need the coin. Not much work for an artist when every patron has decided to start hoarding their wealth for the end of days." "I honestly do not know," admitted Livio. "So far, he's done precisely fuck all." The hunchback's dark robes hid several disfigurements, most of them cybernetic in nature. He was a sacristan, conversant in the utilization and repair of machines. Right now, as he switched out parts from the pictor or replaced power cells, he appeared only to be conversant in a varied lexicon of expletives. "Here." Levio pulled a folder from his long coat and handed it to Maybeth. She opened it and leafed through several flimsies. "They're all useless," she said, frowning. "Just blurred images." "Yep. Doesn't matter what that hunchback arsehole does, the pics won't come out. That's the 6th pictor we've tried." "How long have you been in here?" Levio rubbed his unshaven face, and she had her answer. Maybeth looked back through the images. They are obfuscated, as if overexposed or smeared by a sudden jerk of the lens. But the subject was static, the picture secure, and the light steady. "This is very strange," she conceded. "I've gone from strange to irritating, and I'm circling livid. Or suicidal," said Levio. "It changes by the minute." Maybeth glanced down at her sketch. The rendering was good. The curve of the thigh, the overall musculature, the texture of the lank hair and scarred flesh. As vivid as she had ever been on parchment, and almost more real than any pictograph. "I see," she said, handing back the useless flimsies. "So, if you don't mind," said Levio, "hurry it the hell up. I can't get out of here until you're finished." He walked away to berate the sacristan, leaving Maybeth to it. "Charming," she whispered, but her work was almost done. Just a little detailing remained. She had a leather field case for carrying all her equipment, and pulled from it a magnifying lens she attached over her left eye via a skull frame. Up close, even via the lens, the scene felt intimate. Every knife stroke revealed, every abuse. And it was neat murder, almost surgical. It spoke to obsession. Through her enhancing lens, she looked through a window into something dark. She lingered on the face, partly hidden by the hair. Something looked back at her from those cold, dead eyes. Recognition? Maybeth found herself drawn, though she wanted to recoil. The lips were barely parted, but she caught the suggestion of white teeth, and then they moved. Paradise. Like a lover's breath against her ear, warm and susurrant. The scent of cloying lavender filled her nose. Maybeth tore away the lens, letting out a stifled cry. Levio whirled around, reaching for his sidearm, until he realized the girl had shrieked at shadows. "It's nothing," she said, a little breathless, and out of instinct touched her neck. But there was nothing there. It just felt cold, like a strange absence. Levio scowled, standing down as he went to light up a smoke and muttering something about the bad decisions that had led up to this moment. Tentatively, Maybeth put the lens back on. Nothing happened. The body remained as it was, horrific but lifeless. There was no voice, no scent of lavender, just old blood and musty prayer scrolls. She got what she needed and finished up, handing the parchment to the proctor on her way out. "I expect prompt payment," she said by way of a parting shot. Levio's coarse laughter followed Maybeth until she had left the church. Gethic was waiting for her outside, the servitor's dull eyes barely comprehending his surroundings, and not so different from the corpse Maybeth had just sketched. "Follow," she muttered as she passed the brutish creature, hearing him fall into clomping lockstep behind her. The city had lost its mind since the killings, so it paid to have protection, even if Gethic was a piece of cyborganic shit better suited to the scrap heap than bodyguard detail. Intimidation went a long way, though, and Gethic was big. He smelled of machine oil and rust, but at least it helped to banish the memory of sickly lavender. "Must be tired," she said, and through the gaps in the overarching buildings caught glimpses of the sky. A blood-red blush colored it, like paint clouding in water. Shouts echoed on the warm night air, a sign of the madness to come. She'd be gone before any of that. Maybeth turned away and headed for the mag rail. The other patrons in the carriage gave Gethic a wide berth, though the servitor barely noticed them, and the late hour had thinned the crowd substantially, so it wasn't hard to find a seat. Fires lit parts of the city, seen through a grimy window. The violence had started early tonight. It wouldn't trouble her here, Maybeth reflected, as the rattling journey played out in all its mundanity. She sat in her proctor's shadow. She tried to remember everything she'd experienced in the church. She must have imagined it, but it didn't feel imagined. She had felt his breath, smelled the lavender. The voice had sounded old, but melodic. Definitely male. Not an accent she knew, though, and not from Durgov. From elsewhere. Her mind had conjured it from some remembrance, she reasoned. She rubbed her neck, her fingers gently caressing. The downy hairs felt soft to the touch, and her eyelids fluttered. Paradise. Maybeth sat bolt upright, suddenly aware of her surroundings. Perspiration dappled her skin, her fingertips tingling. A face looked back at her, reflected in the glass. Young and pale from a lifetime spent in her studio, shaven-haired with a streak of violet running through it. A writhing serpentine neck tattoo, her own design. Jewelry on her wrists, gold and platinum. Good robes of warm cerise and a vermilion cloak with a silver artisanal clasp. Last season's fashions. She couldn't keep up like she used to, but her clothes and trappings were still finer than most. Affluent, it spoke to her success. She admired her reflection, pleased with what she saw. And just behind it, another face. Smiling and overlarge, human, and yet... Maybeth turned around, heart pounding, but there was no one sitting behind her. A couple of factorum workers from farther back in the carriage glanced up at the sudden movement, but quickly became downcast again as the day's labors grew heavy. When she looked back, the face had gone. So startled was she, Maybeth nearly missed her stop and had to dash for the exit, her lumbering retainer in tow. "I need to find a different line of work, Gethic," she said, rubbing her eyes as they walked, her hab tower close by. The servitor did not reply, and merely shadowed her as always. "What's that?" asked Maybeth, miming as if he had spoken. "I'm in the wrong profession?" She gave a rueful shake of the head as Oric House came into view. Not so gilded any more with its tatty facade and chipped colonnade. "Yes, you're right. I do need a change in fortune." Greeting the door warden with a tired wave, she went inside. He smiled as she passed, his mouth altogether too wide under the vision slit of his helmet, the teeth too white and too many. Maybeth recoiled, but the guard's sour look had reappeared almost immediately. "I'm losing my damn mind." She hurried inside. Her well-appointed rooms greeted Maybeth upon her return. Everything was as she had left it. The chase, the hookah pipe, her silks and fine drapery, the ornaments and artist's lectern. Dark, on account of the hour, she instructed Gethic to light the lamps. The gloom lifted, shadows lengthened in corners and filled alcoves. The glass shades colored the light, turning it into competing jades and crimsons. Maybeth collapsed onto a pile of plush cushions, her hand outstretched for the drink that Gethic then provided. A sip of absinthe helped ease the nerves, warming as it passed down her throat. "Leave me," she uttered, reaching for the hookah as Gethic turned without comment and retreated into his alcove, out of her sight. Maybeth supped on the pipe, taking long draughts of Kyme smoke. It had been hard to acquire, and not a little expensive, too. Worth every coin, though. She imbibed and smoked until the bottle had drained and her eyelids grew heavy. Fingers slipping from the neck of the pipe, she drifted into a fitful sleep. As she breathed, the smell of oversweet lavender lingered before something sharper replaced it, and she dreamed of a forest, not of trees but of the dead, their limbs contorted in branches, their feet rooted to the earth, and the red, red sap of their blood. Maybeth woke drenched in sweat, the lingering scent of warm copper already fading. Gray lights surrounded her, the hour still early. Gethic must have doused the lamps. She started as she saw him looming over her, his dull bionic eye glowing like dirty amber. "What are you doing?" she croaked, annoyed at her own skittishness. "What are you doing, slave?" Gethic didn't respond. Her throat felt hoarse, like she'd been screaming in her sleep. The servitor's protection protocols must have kicked in. "I'm fine," she lied, deciding to get up. That's when she noticed the metal tube in Gethic's hands. He hadn't activated because of a protection protocol. He had taken receipt of a package. It came with an attached note. A snap of her fingers, and Gethic lit the nearest lamp. "Mab," the note began, "I think I may have found the last decent paying commission in this entire shit heap of a city." She knew the handwriting. Irina was Maybeth's abitur, a seeker of work. It was she who had secured the contract with the peacekeepers. Hardly what Maybeth was used to, but it kept the debtors at bay and her decanters full. There was a time when they'd enjoyed more than just a business relationship, but Maybeth's tastes had changed, and so had her suitors. Still, old memories stirred at seeing her delicate script and provoked a frisson of lust. She turned over the parchment onto the opposite side. "Private contract. 3 pieces. Simple restoration needed. Yes, I know it's still low end, but it pays better than the peacekeepers, and there are fewer dead bodies." She signed off, "Y," adding a postscript. "And that ugly golem needs a thorough cleanse, by the way." The note came with the address of the commissioner and the fee amount her abettor had brokered. Maybeth smiled and took the metal tube. "Well done, Irena." The tube had been marked with an unfamiliar merchant's sigil that looked like a V inside. She found 3 pieces of rolled-up canvas. Unfurling each in turn, Maybeth laid them out on the floor, weighing them down with ornaments to keep them from curling back up. They were venerations, holy scenes from imperial history, albeit faded and in need of repair. She didn't recognize the saints depicted, or the other religious figures, the cardinals and the abbesses. She only saw the work ahead and began immediately. Maybeth fashioned simple frames for each piece from which she could begin the restoration, and then placed them under her artist's lectern, which was wide enough to accommodate all three. Curious, she thought, regarding them as a set, and wondering what interest a mercantile house would have in ecclesiarchal relics. A thorough assessment of the condition of the pieces preceded any actual work. The canvas was old, that much was quick to determine, although precisely how old she genuinely couldn't say. It had been preserved with oils or perhaps some synthetic equivalent, which made the canvas slightly stiff and flaky at the edges. After she handled each piece to clean them, she noticed a farinaceous substance layering her gloves. Again, she couldn't identify it, and it only happened on that first occasion, so she assumed the painting hadn't been disturbed for some time. She worked steadily, reinvigorating the tired pastels, giving them vibrancy and depth. Maybeth felt reinvigorated, not unlike the ecclesiarchs in the paintings. The brighter the image became, the lighter her mood, as if faith and protection radiated from it. Hours passed without her realizing, and by the time the phonogram started to drone, she had restored a cardinal's vestments and trappings. He was depicted standing upon some nondescript promontory, giving a fiery sermon to his flock. The phonogram droned again. She tried to ignore it, but it began to irritate, and when she turned and saw the peacekeeper's ident, she swore loudly. Levio's gravel voice crackled through the receiver cup when she picked it up. "Need your talents again?" "I have other work, Proctor." "That can wait. Your contract gives the city unrestricted access." Fucking Irena, she thought, feeling less amorous towards the woman as Levio reminded her of that particular clause. "Can it possibly wait? I'm in the middle of something." "So am I. It's another one." And with those three words, Maybeth knew she would be leaving the Hab as soon as the call was over. "Same as last time." "Different." Levio sounded like he was about to say more, but then swallowed audibly to clear his throat, and gave her the address. "Different how?" "I'm not describing it over the phonogram," he snapped, then quickly regained his composure. "Just get down here." He cut the feed and the phonogram line went dead. "Arso!" Maybeth looked back at the paintings. They would have to wait. The dead, it seemed, would not. Another dilapidated church, another depravity. The sacristans had returned, more out of hope than expectation, and they had just finished rigging a string of lumens to flood the scene with pearlescent light as Maybeth made her entrance. She had to crane her neck to see. The victim had been suspended on wire. No, not wire. The veins had been pulled from its arms, woven together and used to hang it like a piece of art. "He's embracing it now," she thought, trying to remain analytical. The victim hung in front of an immense window, its glacaics smeared in blood and other matter. Wan light streamed through, casting a ragged shadow. Entirely naked, the victim's arms were outstretched, its legs pinned together. But this was not what marked it out as different to the previous murder. The skin had been flayed from its back and chest, and then spread out like a pair of leathery wings behind it. Angelic. Horrific. The ribs were exposed, rimed with blood and glistening in the light. Intertwined organs had been heaped below, a rubbery tract unfurling from the abdomen like some gory streamer. The face was untouched, but for one detail. One of the eyes had been cut out. "Thrawn," uttered Maybeth, and swiftly covered her mouth. She smelled Levio as he sidled up next to her, the reek of sweat and cheap tobacco pervasive. "I understand why you didn't want to describe it over phonogram," she said, recovering. "In Aquila," he replied, gesturing to the victim's altered form. "Even I can discern that much. Who the hells does that?" I don't know. A religious fanatic? Aren't you supposed to work that out? Levio rubbed his balding scalp. The man looked paler and older since last night. I have no frame of reference for this. It would take strength, ventured Maybeth, and precision. Still think it's art? I think the killer does. Levio lit up a smoke. Paradise. Maybeth turned on him. What did you say? From Levio's expression, she must have looked fearsome. He held up his hands. That's what the witness said. What bloody witness? She was livid, practically shaking. The smile, the sickly scent of lavender. Easy, said Levio. Calm down. Maybeth stared, heart pounding. She felt feverish. A cold sweat clung to her body like a rotten bandage. Are you all right? She snapped back, hard as a spring. The fever ebbed. I'm fine, she lied. I didn't know there was a witness. Why does it matter? Someone is killing people seemingly at random and turning them into grotesque anatomical works of art, Maybeth replied, still a little shaky. I am both professionally intrigued and personally appalled. Of course it matters. Who is the witness? An old curate. The church is mostly in a state of disrepair. He was effectively the caretaker until it could be restored, though not much chance of that given the state of things. He's back at the precinct house with the interrogators who are trying to find out what he knows. He didn't tell them. Beyond saying that word, he hasn't said much of anything. Whatever he saw, he didn't like it, and it definitely wasn't him who did it before you ask. I wasn't going to. Yeah. Strength and precision and all that. Fancy yourself a peacekeeper, artisan? Maybeth didn't answer. She'd had enough of Levio. She gathered her tools and began. The sooner she got started, the sooner she could leave. The return to Oric House was conducted in silence. The rioting and unrest in the city had forced her to take a more circuitous route via Maglev, and by the time she reached her studio again, night had drawn in. It seemed perpetual now, and the memory of the flayed angel, as she had come to regard it, lingered like the aroma of decay. And no matter how hard she tried to mentally excoriate it, it would not go away. A long pulse shower when she was safely back in her domicile did little but leave her itchy and hot. She dressed in a gown, a glass of absinthe to soothe her fractious nerves, every mirror shawled by a blanket. On the journey back, she had assiduously avoided looking into any reflective surfaces, glass or otherwise. A silver snuff-box held to her nose to keep any undesirable odors at bay. No visitations from the lavender man came to her. Am I losing my mind? She murmured. Gethic, lurking in his alcove, offered no comment. Definitely losing it, if I'm trying to make conversation with a servitor. Perhaps she should call Irena for a rendezvous, but she didn't want to go out into the city at night. Not with the curfew and the violence, and her domicile was in a parlous state, so she couldn't invite her over. Empty bottles everywhere, the reek of Kyme on her rugs and drapes. She settled for another absinthe instead, before slumping into a pile of cushions to regard the 3 paintings sitting on her lectern. Subject matter in kind, but different artists, she reflected. The work remained, a refuge and a spiritual tonic. Maybeth sighed. It's not like I can sleep anyway. Putting her glass down, Maybeth took up her tools. It was late, and the work painstaking, but she threw herself into it as if each small act of restoration cleansed a part of her soul. The images in her mind lessened in intensity. The imagined scent of lavender faded. Saints were brought to life on canvas, and it felt good. She made swift progress, an obsessive-compulsive urge to be rid of the taint of remembering driving her. Then she saw something unexpected. She had begun to strip back the layers of ink and pigment, intending to rebuild them from the base up where the image was particularly degraded, when she noticed part of a second image, incongruent with the first, revealed beneath. A magnifying lens from her iris attachment brought it into sharper focus. She couldn't tell what it was exactly, but she was certain it was not a part of the religious scene. A layer beneath a layer. Hakasto had called it Pentimento, when one image is subtly altered or a previous one painted over entirely, though there was too little of the hidden image to discern much of anything about its subject. The rationale for hiding it was intriguing. Curious, Maybeth muttered, and tried to reveal more. She reasoned she could repair the upper image later, but this one beneath, this secret, beguiled her. Her fingers ached, and while a heavy dose of stims kept her going until the deep night hours, the scalpel eventually slipped her grasp, and she fell into an exhausted sleep. Maybeth woke to a feeling of disquiet, and the vague memory of a troubling dream that, try as she might to grasp, dissipated like smoke. Sensations remained, of pain and pleasure, the instinct of peeling back the layers of her skin to reveal the dark places within. She shivered, despite the warmth of the morning and the blanket she had wrapped around herself. Through the half-light streaming through the drapes, she saw the paintings and felt a moment of profound arrhythmia. More of the secondary image had been revealed. It was the same on all three canvases, despite the fact she could not remember working on the other two. But then she had taken a cocktail of alcohol and narcotics. She had lost time before. Gethic, she slurred, still drowsy. The servitor lumbered from its alcove. Show me a vid from last night. The servitor hard-linked to a cogitator sitting on a low table, and Maybeth waited for the device to warm up. A flicking projector cast the images from the servitor's gaping mouth onto the wall. Here we go, she whispered as the vid capture began to render and cycle. Then she frowned and glared over her shoulder at Gethic. I said last night. Confirmed, he said in a mechanized rasp, the voice coming from a vox unit in the servitor's neck. This is everything? Confirmed. Her eyes narrowed, disbelieving. Are you certain, Gethic? Confirmed. Perhaps she needed a sacristan herself. The vid units in her domicile, the ones she used to capture her artistic process for later review, had to be faulty. Blurred images filled her wall like an overexposed Pict, only in motion. She caught snatches of something. Maybeth drew closer as the vid continued to run, trying to see past the image flicker. What in the hells? Not her domicile. Definitely not that. It looked like bones. A hard rap at the door gave her a start. She cursed loudly, rubbing her eyes from staring so intently at the image now paused on her wall. She called out, already regretting it. Identify! It was Levio. Couldn't reach you via phonogram, he mumbled through the door. He sounded even more perturbed than usual. So you came to my abode, Maybeth snapped. She dimly remembered asking Gethic to cut the phonogram shortly after she had entered. A glance at the unit confirmed it. Abode? Levio muttered something unseemly about artists and their ilk, then added, So, can I come in, or do we shout at each other through your door? Maybeth was sorely tempted, but she gestured for Gethic to let the proctor in. He cut the images first, the wall turning blank again. Even the sight of the proctor, disheveled, pale, even thin, brought back the fear. He had become synonymous with it. Is it him? She asked in a quiet voice. The lavender man. Levio nodded and didn't challenge her. He had smelled it too. Fuck. That meant it wasn't in her mind. It was something else. She chose not to comment and instead looked through a gap in her drapes at the dawning sky outside, at the strange heavens that now fell over the city, and she wondered. Take me there, she said, sparing a glance at the paintings, and went to get dressed. It was different this time, in every way. Not a church or a temple, no glassaic or catechisms. A woodland with an overgrown esplanade running through it. In a clearing, a body had been staked out, its limbs meticulously and perfectly bifurcated, 4 becoming 8, and arranged in a star shape. Pale white flesh, painstakingly exsanguinated, shimmered like wet marble in the rain. No sacristans this time. They had learned their lesson, that their technology had no part in this, no purchase upon whatever this was. It was just Levio and a squad of peacekeepers wearing black carapace and carrying shotguns to ward off the curious. Maybeth counted herself among them, but she had been invited beyond the electrocordon, her servitor waiting dully some distance behind her. Why? She asked simply. Why what? Levio answered. I'm not a damned mind shriver. How should I know why the sick bastard is doing this? No, said Maybeth patiently. Why do you need me to illustrate this? It has to be captured. Known, he said, then added more quietly. Allegedly, certain parties are interested. He extended his middle finger so it looked like the letter I. Interrogators. And worse, I expect. He lit a smoke. Maybeth noticed his fingers trembled. Look, he blew out a plume. If you don't want to, I can say I couldn't find you. Won't your colleagues say I was here? Maybeth gestured to the peacekeepers on sentry duty in the distance, partly veiled by the rain. She pulled up her coat collar, but it wasn't much comfort. They want rid of this as much as I do. City's going to the hells, in case you didn't notice. She'd noticed. So they don't give 2 shits about you. Reassuring. You know what I mean. Maybeth stared at the body. So cold, so beautiful. It was immaculate in every way. The work of a true artist. I want to do it, she said, mumbling the words. The weather soured further as Maybeth worked, a protective sheath over the vellum to keep the ink and charcoal dry. Levio sheltered her with a parasol Maybeth had brought to the scene, his face a picture of resigned annoyance. Is it a statement? Is that it? He asked after a while. Is that what he's doing, do you think? Maybeth kept illustrating, her strokes deft and assured, despite the horrific nature of her composition. I thought you said I should stick to what I know. Stop trying to be a peacekeeper. I didn't say that. Not in so many words. Levio grumbled his assent. I don't think it's as random as it appears, said Maybeth. A tree? An angel? No, this. She paused to flex her fingers, tight after prolonged use of the charcoal stylets. It's almost as if he's recreating something. A ritual, perhaps. The parasol shivered as Levio tried to stifle a sudden intake of breath. He bit his lip and kept pulling at the buttons on his storm cloak. He needed a smoke. Ever since the sky changed, he said at length, the city changed, and us with it. By us, he meant Durgov's citizens. It's always been bad here. Murder, discord, the things people will do to each other. I've seen it all. But this is the first time I've felt such fear. Not just my own, but it's everywhere. It's like it slipped in through the cracks when the sky turned red and has been seeping into us ever since. In our air, in our food, bodies. What are you trying to say, Proctor? He rubbed his chin, the lip biting now chronic. Have you ever felt rain before it starts? You know, smelled it or tasted it on the air and just knew? Of course. Hasn't everyone to some extent? It feels like that. Like something is coming, only it isn't rain. He fell abruptly silent after that, and Maybeth was glad to be rid of his company the instant she was finished. Leviot gave a curt wave as she took her leave, a vacant look in his eyes not so different from Gethic. He looked almost hollow. Something is coming, only it isn't rain. The words followed her after she left the murder scene, and so too the scent of lavender, faint on the air. Leviot must have smelled it too, but neither spoke of it. To do so would only make it more real. The paintings would be her salvation, the restoration of the saints and the cleansing of her soul. She returned to her domicile, the idea of indulging in such pious work soothing. No interruptions, she ordered, and Gethic nullified the phonogram before retreating into his alcove. Maybeth set to work, revivifying old pigment, giving it vibrancy and depth. Purification through art. The brush paused in her hand. I have to know, she murmured as a deep obsession took hold. I am a sailor, and they the siren. I shall go gratefully to their rocks. A scalpel replaced the brush, and Maybeth's attention turned to the as yet unrevealed and the promise of the unknown, the image in Pentimento. She worked feverishly, almost in a frenzy, the scrapings like flecks of skin flayed from a corpse. Maybeth barely noticed. The work came easily, paint peeling away without resistance, as if what lay below wanted to be found. She would let it. She wanted it, too, more than anything. After several hours, a fresh vista began to materialize beneath the veneer of the first. Not bones, but an Eden of lush and exotic flowers, of strange crystal and dappled sunlight, and something her eyes did not want to acknowledge. And in that stark moment of revelation, a sudden inertialess lurch seized upon her, and she realized her mistake, her terrible mistake. It was paradise, rasped Maybeth, and fell into a deep, fathomless dream. She is walking barefoot, the dew cold and refreshing against her skin. A grove had risen up around her, swollen with strange trees that are ripe with luscious, heart-shaped fruit. She is tempted to take a bite, and reaches for the branch's bounty, but something stops her. In the distance, thunder, or what sounds like thunder, and a white noise susurration like a cataract rushing over a cave mouth. She turns, a prey animal alerted to the scent of a predator, and sees him. In shadow at first, the strange scented arbors of the forest hide him from her sight, and she has to twist to see. He is naked, apart from the modesty cloth around his waist. A study in anatomical perfection, almost deific. Unreal. A statue given perfect animation. His muscles are carved as if from pink opal, and a mane cascades around his shoulders like spun silver. Violet eyes glint and flash, alive, amused, desirous. She flashes at the thought, terror and arousal warring like belligerent nations. In that instant of connection, she knows him, or rather, what he represents. He is the paragon of pleasures, a lord of excess, and he is here for her. I know you, he says, though his lips are unmoving. I am you. And for a moment, it is bliss. Until the blades unsheath and the hooks unfurl, and she is pinioned and torn. Undressed of her skin, it flutters away like taffeta, like flightless wings. And he smiles that over-wide smile, his teeth like pearls, and the scent of lavender overwhelms her. She doesn't scream. She can barely breathe. Something heavy is pressing against her chest, a noose taut around her throat. She thrashes. A lamp shatters as she kicks it. Absinthe spills in a milky flood. The drapes tear at her grasping fingers, and the sunlight crashes in. Am I dying? A hot poker in her chest, jabbing at the coals of her organs. Please. Then relief. Her bindings loosed in an instant. The pain gone. Maybeth stares, blinking in the harsh red morning. Its light brings revelation. The paintings are not three. They are one. Where the obfuscation of newer paint had been excised to reveal the old, she sees paradise stretched over each canvas. A triptych of pulchritudinous gardens, vigorous, staggering, like a foreign country to her senses. Seeded with bones and nourished with blood, Eden springing vibrantly from the slaughter. The juxtaposition is so incongruous as to be almost indiscernible. A familiar grove stands out, partially revealed beneath flaking pigment. Its strange trees are bourgeoning with heart-shaped fruit. No, not fruit. Hearts. Living, beating human hearts. And they are not trees, they are people rooted and cruciform. Maybeth recoiled. The scalpel she didn't know she was still holding clattering to the floor as she shuffled away on her backside, kicking madly, arms scrabbling. The wall was solid at her back, and she could flee no further. Her gaze was transfixed on the paintings, at the parts still to be scraped away, at horrors yet unknown. For 3 days she didn't move, didn't speak, didn't sleep, until Levio contacted her again. Fires lit the city, the smoke thick but unable to hide the blood-red sky. It had turned a deeper crimson with the onset of night and echoed with the shrieking of desperate men. Maybeth did her best to avoid the crowds. After alighting from the maglev, she and Gethic took side streets and lesser-known byways. It scared her, the rioting, but that fear had been dulled by something darker. It called still, but she ignored it. An effort of will she could not sustain. Levio looked skeletal as he waited with 2 armored peacekeepers beneath the sepulchre's portico. Deep rings sunk his eyes like small pebbles at the bottom of a well. He finished a smoke stick, crushing it beneath his heel where it joined a regiment of others, and lit another. Inside. Maybeth followed, leaving the 2 sentries outside. The tomb had been made for a dignitary of the city, an ecclesiarch judging by the religious statuary. Something lay piled in one corner, folded neatly upon a stone seat. She assumed they were robes. Perhaps they are symbolic, she thought. A reliquary stood upon a plinth in the middle of the gloomy chamber, the bones of 2 saints entwined, their heads upturned to a light they would never see, their bony hands outstretched in faux supplication. I don't understand, said Macbeth, frowning. Where is the... Levio ignited a lumen, and the bones shone faint pink. She gasped as the awful truth revealed itself. Emperor! He isn't here, breathed Levio. The robes, they weren't... And then the bones... How? Levio didn't answer, and that was answer enough. Markings had been scrimshawed into the bone, Maybeth moved nearer for a better look. Outside, the clamor had grown. Closer. A word carved into femurs and rib bones and clavicles. Paradisum. High Gothic, barely used now, but more common several centuries ago. A warning shot alerted her. One of the peacekeepers. A coalition of voices answered. Paradise. I can't do this. Maybeth fled the chamber and stepped outside into chaos. A mob had descended. They were afraid, like wild animals, running with fire and knives, desperate to quench their fear with blood. A shotgun barked so close it startled her, and the sound of it rang in her ears like tinnitus. The sepulchre was sunk into a natural valley, and there were men roaring down a ramp towards it. Towards her. A second blast, no longer in warning. A man was cut down. The two peacekeepers stepped up, one kneeling as the other stood and braced. They bellowed their authority at the coming horde, and their words lacked conviction. Levio didn't join them, and stayed with the dead. Breathless, terrified, her mind close to shutting down, Maybeth called out, "Gavik!" she rasped. "Get away from here!" The servitor obeyed, his lurching patchwork frame never more reassuring as it drove like a plow into the mob. Maybeth stayed close, a desperate hand clinging to his belt. Behind her, the shotguns spoke again. They spoke one more time, a press of shouting men around her, unable to dull the shock of the sound. Then no more. She was fortunate. The mob had no interest in her, though she would have been collateral if not for her slave. He must have killed a few in his headlong charge. She had heard bone-breaking cries suddenly choked off. Gethic himself was torn, a dozen wounds spilling blood and oil, the whole mess of it congealing as it turned his boiler suit black. He stumbled, slowing. A servitor is a cyborg, but it is still flesh. Maybeth knew his injuries were mortal. Dull-eyed, uncomprehending, Gethic got her as far as the only maglev out of the district before he slumped, a puppet left slack on its strings, and did not stir again. Maybeth reached Auric House in a half-blind panic. The guard was absent his post, likely fled. Bolting up the stairs, she got to her domicile and fumbled with the locks, several nervous glances behind her revealing nothing but a dimly lit corridor. Inside, the door slammed in her wake. Heart hammering, she lurched through the entryway and into the studio where the painting stood, apparently innocuous. And yet, the old renderings of saints had been further scraped away, by her hand, by another. Maybeth no longer knew for sure. She tried to raise Irena via the phonogram. She had a speech prepared about demanding to know the provenance of the paintings and the identity of who had bought her expertise. She would reject them, reject the commission, claim it was a cult, proscribed. She would threaten, mention the interrogators. Her blood was up, and she trembled with anticipation of the furor to come. But Irena did not answer, and the phonogram returned only dead air. Maybeth smashed down the receiver cup, partly shattering the plastek. She wanted to scream, anger a natural antidote to fear. A snarl on her lips, she stalked to the lectern and snatched all three canvases, hastily bundling them under her arms. She recalled the patron's address in the city, and, despite her best good sense, ventured to back out. I should burn them, she thought, but she had no desire to add an angry patron to her woes. And the merchants in Durgov were not known for their forgiveness, particular in matters of property. It might not matter anyway. The city was burning, at least in the slums and the poor districts. A fever had gripped it. Fear, the great motivator for selfish men who hide their anxieties behind cruelty and wanton violence. Maybeth wanted nothing more than to shut herself away, But only when this last act was done, and she was rid of the paintings, could she hide again. She had been hiding for years, ever since Hakasto, ever since... Lost in her thoughts, Maybeth almost didn't realize she had arrived at her destination. A razor-wire fence surrounded a nondescript warehouse and offices. A faded sign declared the name of the merchant combine who owned it, and answered the minor mystery of what the V stood for on its metal tube. Valgast Exports. The warehouse was burning, every inch of it wreathed in conflagration. Flames reached up into the sky, turning it into a deeper red, staining it with black smoke. Nothing else burned, only this property, and the mob had not reached this district yet. And the fire did not spread, as if dedicated solely to this destruction of Valgast Exports. The oddness of it sent a spasm through Maybeth. Her grip tightened on the canvas, still clenched in her shaking hands. She wanted to tear them, rend them into pieces, and cast them onto the fire. Instead, she sank to her knees and wept. It took a few moments for Maybeth to regain her composure. She knew she couldn't stay here. She had to get back to Auric House. Maybe she could try Irena again. She hadn't realized how badly she needed to hear her voice, any voice. Stumbling through side streets, it wasn't long before a part of the mob found her. Maybeth thought perhaps they were bullet makers, though their grubby overalls would suit many menial professions. "Please," she said, shivering like prey in hunter's sight, "I have nothing of value." The look on the men's faces suggested otherwise, and she had to stifle an involuntary yelp as she started to back away from her aggressors. She had fine clothes, at least to the likes of them. Jewelry, ostensible wealth, a noblewoman abroad on unquiet streets and unprotected. Maybeth pulled the collar of her robes tighter. An alleyway she hadn't noticed before suddenly presented itself, and she took it, bolting like a startled Gyrinx. She dumped the canvases. To hells with the consequences. The merchants could burn like their fucking warehouse for all she cared. Behind her, she heard the grunting of pursuit and the tread of heavy, dirty boots. Oh shit, oh shit! They were closing, driven by something animalistic. No, no, no! And then nothing. After a few hundred yards, Maybeth slowed and then stopped. The faint aroma of lavender pricked her nostrils, and she whirled around in a panic, half expecting to see him. But the narrow byway she found herself in was empty, although rude tenements crowded on either side. Turning, she realized no one was chasing her either. The entire street was silent, as if shrinking back into itself and holding its breath. Not questioning her good fortune, but trembling at so close a call, Maybeth found Auric House again. She staggered inside, her breathing ragged, and began to shake. Trauma settled in now, the adrenaline had bled away. A drink would ease the nerves, maybe a bottle, or two. The absinthe veritably gulped into the glass, the edge chinking as it met the lip of the bottle. Maybeth drained it, poured another, and drained that too. Slowly calming down, she took the bottle and the glass and went to find a place to slump. As she passed the open archway of the studio, the bottle and the glass slipped from her fingers and smashed against the floor. On the lectern were the 3 canvases, and as the paint began to fragment, flaking away like dead skin, Maybeth found she was drawn to them. To it. A single vista, doggedly revealed for her to see. Without knowing why, she took up her scalpel and began to scrape away the upper layer, and with every stroke she uncovered greater and greater horrors. A scene of beauty and torture, of unparalleled human suffering so vivid she could almost hear their screaming. Tears streamed down Maybeth's face, but she couldn't stop it. It had her now. Perhaps it had taken her long ago, that first night. Perhaps it was inevitable. The painting, the true image, was a conduit. Acosto had always taught her that art is a voyeur upon the soul, its flaws and virtues laid bare upon canvas. Something from the realm of the soul had found its way through. The Lavender Man stood proudly amongst his depravity, his paradise immortalized in oil paint. The artist, whoever it was, had captured his essence perfectly, and in a moment of stasis caught between action and inaction, Maybeth wondered how much of it was actually paint. A gentle touch nudged her hand back to the task, and she shuddered, the scent of lavender stronger now, and warm breath upon her neck. "I am here," the killer said without speaking, "as I promised I would be." She had done this. Her pride, her obsession, her excesses. It had brought her to his attention. "Please," she tried to whisper, but a soft susurration stayed any further objection. "Shh." Outside her hab, the city had begun to eat itself. The rioting was everywhere, rising like a black tide to wash away anything good, anything pure. The structures would not hold. She bit her lip, using the pain to try to drown it out. The cloying scent of his perfume made her gag, but she dared not stop. She felt the heat of his skin near her own, both a furnace and a glacier. Maybeth scraped away the above to reveal the below, knowing that as she did so his foothold in the real would solidify. A dead sky presented itself, blood-red and terrible. A great wall thronged with desperate fighting in the distance, gods and monsters vying for the fate of mankind. The thoughts came unbidden, the memories and realizations not her own. "Terra," a voice in her head told her. She knew it then, the vista revealed upon the canvas. An ancient war, the oldest of wars. The great heresy. "The long war," the voice supplied, and could not hide its bitterness. The last piece fell away. A nondescript corner, but its style at odds with the rest, as if painted by a different hand. Two robed figures. Maybeth released a gasp, for it was her. A perfect portrait. She had a red blade in her hand, and before her on the ground was the second figure, older, dying, a feeble hand pressed to the wound in his chest as blood poured from his mouth. Maybeth was transfixed. The bare truth of her crime rendered as clearly as a Pict, an impossible image as damning as any confession. His perfumed breath broke her dark remembrance. Perfection always comes at a price. The hand upon her neck was firm but not painful. Not yet. It turned her head, and she took in her abode. The indulgence, the trappings of wealth, desire, and obsession. Tell me, what did your master call it? That which is hidden beneath? Pentimento? Said Maybeth, almost beyond the ability for rational thought. It means redemption, she added, a needless translation, her gaze now fixed upon the image of her murdering Hakasto, so she could be preeminent, so she could be perfect. A lie to hide another lie, the killer answered, his organic voice as old as millennia. Maybeth would find no redemption here, she realized, as the blades and the hooks bit into her flesh, and as she screamed they started to pull. But there will always be art, the killer replied, as if reading her thoughts. And this is my canvas. That was Pentimento by Kyme.